mio paese. L'atto mio di necessità non è quello originale, non è quello che loro vogliono. Io avevo bisogno solamente di qualcosa di scritto che non sono in grado di... Loro mi dicono che noi ti facciamo un visto semplice, vai, però poi non può più tornare. Ma stiamo scherzando? Oui, bonjour, je suis Volo. Moi, je cherche Monsieur Motoli, si c'est possible.
Monsieur Motoli il est absent aujourd'hui. Il ne vient pas parce qu'il a des choses à régler.
Bon, ils m'ont dit hier d'appeler ce matin parce que j'ai parlé avec un de votre collègue qui m'a dit d'appeler ce matin. Parce que oui, c'est lui qui m'a... Alors, oui, mais c'est lui qui m'a appelé, parce que moi j'appelle du Tessin. Parce que mon avocat, il a écrit des lettres parce que j'avais besoin d'un document de voyage pour aller au Congo.
C'est vous, monsieur...
Evolo. Evolo.
Attendez. Un instant. Monsieur Evolo.
Oui.
Voilà. Votre CIV est là. Vous devez venir signer le CIV.
Oui, alors, bonjour, je suis Evolo. J'ai un rendez-vous pour signer des documents. Ah, ok. Bonjour. Excusez-moi, je suis Evolo. Bonjour, madame. Enchanté. Uff. Questo qua è il documento che rilasciano a tutte le persone straniere che fanno la richiesta per avere il passaporto. Però non è detto che presentando all'aeroporto questo documento io possa ancora ritornare indietro. Sono a casa! No!
Dopo giorni di attesa, il permesso per filmare nel paese non arriva. Qualcosa mi spinge però a cominciare le riprese. Qualcosa che si spiegherà con ciò che sta per accadere. Per essere discreti, usiamo una macchina fotografica che filma. Chiedo di riprendere il fiume Congo. Mi propongono le rapide e decido di andarci.
A casa.
Raggiunta la riva del fiume, vengo a sapere da una guardia armata che c'è in zona il ministro del turismo per un sopralluogo. All'improvviso il ministro, probabilmente perché siamo stranieri, si interessa a noi.
Venez, madame la ministre du tourisme va vous recevoir. Venez.
Non so bene che cosa dirle, dato che l'autorizzazione per le riprese non ce l'ho ancora. Ma non appena accenniamo alla storia di Evolo, la reazione della ministra ci sorprende e ha dell'incredibile.
Tu connais ce nom?
Prego, se no chiamo io.
C'est quoi ton nom? C'est qui pour moi les autres? Oh non, mon Dieu, non!
j'y crois pas. J'y crois pas. C'est pas vrai. C'est pas vrai. C'est pas vrai.
Avec un Congolais, je regarde son extrait date de naissance. Tu sais ce que je lis dessus? Il est né à Wesso et il est né de Ewolo Rocher. Non, il est le fils plutôt d'Ewolo Jean-Richard. Oui, c'est ton petit frère, ne quitte pas, je te passe ton fils. C'est papa Oscar Ewolo. Mon Dieu. Non. Si, on va aller le voir maintenant. Oh, attends. Mais dis que j'ai vu le nom de ma famille. Donne le téléphone. À nous parler, Oscar n'arrive pas à parler. Il est arrivé hier, on l'a abandonné en fils depuis l'âge de 2 ans là-bas. Et il a son extrait date de naissance, c'est marqué ici, fils de Ewolo Jean-Richard. Et de Eboumo Amédée. C'est ça, non? Sa maman est camerounaise. C'est le fils de Yamédé. Mais je connais sa maman. C'est le fils de Yamédé. Hé, comment on était allé de l'orphelinat où elle pleure, tout ça. C'est le fils de Yamédé. Je connais sa mère aussi. Elle travaille avec la première dame, elle est tout le temps avec elle, elle fait partie de la famille. Non, on va les déposer, c'est papa Oscar Ewolo. On va les déposer, c'est papa. C'est un monsieur connu, c'était l'aide de camp du président Marien Ngouabi. C'était le patron de sa garde.
Qu'est-ce que je dois lui dire, c'est ça? Je suis en train de rêver là, c'est 40.
Ouais, il est très gentil, lui. Très, très gentil. Ton papa est très gentil. Normalement, la famille Ewolo, tout le monde soit gentil.
Vraiment.
Ah, oui. C'est une grande famille que tu as ici au Congo. Hein? Ah ouais, ouais. Famille Ewolo, c'est une grande famille.
On peut venir ici, chérie.
Oui.
40 ans.
C'est la vérité. Il y a 15 jours, l'ambassadeur Guillaume m'avait posé la question, est-ce que j'ai un enfant en Suisse? Je lui ai dit, il s'appelle Ewolo. Je lui ai dit, je sais que mon frère, mon dernier frère, a eu un enfant, mais je ne l'ai jamais vu. Oui. Et il a favorisé le passage pour qu'il puisse arriver.
Je suis là, je suis là.
Entrez.
Oh. On va voir les photos.
Le voici.
C'est mon
Votre père.
Mon père.
Voilà.
Ça, c'est mon père.
Oui, ça c'est votre père.
Oh, mon Dieu.
Bon, nous sommes restés deux.
Le grand-père.
Le grand-père est mort. Puis, la grand-mère, notre aîné, et ainsi de suite. On était 7. Il était le dernier.
Oh là là.
Moi, je suis le 4e.
Il est mort il y a combien de temps, mon papa?
Déjà plus de 20 ans.
Oui.
Avant la guerre.
Le sourire, les yeux, le visage.
Bien sûr, chez nous, les Africains, les Noirs, on croit en nos ancêtres.
Oui.
Et très souvent, ça arrive
Je lui
que
disais à
vous
l'aéroport.
revenez à la maison. Ce sont les esprits qui vous ont ramené à la maison.
Oh là là.
l'autre était ici, elle est partie à Paris.
Ma soeur?
Oui.
J'ai une soeur?
Oui.
Pamela et Olo.
Ah oui?
Paris, oui.
Oui, je sais. C'est émouvant. Tu vas bien? Oui, je sais. Oh, je suis ton frère, tu sais. T'es ma soeur. Oh, je dis qu'on ressemble à papa.
Tu as vu ça, papa Oscar?
Quand on dit les esprits s'attirent,
Oscar, mais il y a un truc qui va pas.
Oui,
Il
c'est
y a
ça.
un truc qui va pas.
Un petit peu.
Oui,
Maman est là. Dès que j'ai lu Ewolo, je lui dis, est-ce que tu sais que c'est ma famille? Je regarde à côté Amédée, je dis, Dieu,
Voilà, c'est ça.
c'est pas possible. Il te ressemble en plus.
Oui.
Je suis plus ému. Depuis que
Il
je
a
fais comme
toute ta tête en plus.
Oui.
Vraiment.
Tu sais que tu enlèves tes lunettes, il a toute ta tête.
Oui.
Tu as vu, maman?
Oui.
Il a toute
il
sa
a
tête.
vieilli, quoi.
C'est pas
Oui.
possible.
Oui.
je dis, je sens quelqu'un en train de m'appeler. Il faut
C'est
que
ta
j'aille, il faut
maman
que
qui
j'aille.
crie pour toi.
À l'aéroport,
Les
il
mamans,
faut...
tu sais, je sais pas comment lui expliquer ça. Perdre une partie de soi, un enfant, c'est une partie de soi.
Oui, je comprends ça.
On n'est jamais tranquille.
Même la manière de partir d'ici.
Voilà, je sais pas. On n'est pas tranquille.
Voilà.
Toute une vie, ça vous... Jusqu'au soir de votre vie, vous avez ça dans la conscience. Il y a quelque chose qui vous manque. Même
Oui.
vous pouvez avoir 15 enfants. Il suffit qu'un seul vous manque.
Oui, oui.
Dans ce genre de circonstances, ça reste une plaie béante
Oui.
jusqu'au soir de votre vie. C'est dur ce qui est arrivé.
Parce qu'avec la mort de mon frère aussi, j'étais perturbé. Maman n'était pas avec mon frère.
Ils n'étaient pas ensemble.
Ils étaient ensemble.
C'est ça. Là, ils n'étaient pas ensemble.
Ils n'étaient pas ensemble.
Mais comment? Ah. Lui, il était déjà... papa, il était déjà marié.
Ton papa a eu d'abord une première femme.
Oui.
Bon, pas une femme, une copine.
Copine.
Ils ont eu une fille. Elle s'appelle Judith. Mais elle est décédée. Elle est décédée à l'âge de 30 ans. Hein?
Ah, jeune.
Ouais, elle est décédée. Papa a pris encore une autre dame. Ils ont eu Pamela et Olu. C'est
Ma sœur.
Ta sœur qui est à Paris. Voilà. Et ensuite, papa est sorti avec ta maman aussi à m'aider. Quand il est mort, la veille, c'était ici. Voilà. Et ta maman était là. Toute ta famille était là. Ta maman aussi était là, à m'aider. Il nous a parlé de vous.
Oui,
Et il a
on
dit-
sait bien.
Il a dit, parce qu'on a demandé, nous sommes les enfants de Richard. Il a dit, moi aussi j'ai un enfant avec Richard.
Richard, oui.
L'enfant est où? Non, je vais l'amener et tout. Et après, c'est parti. Donc c'est elle qui connaît bien l'histoire là.
Oui.
Oui.
We tell the untold stories. We speak when others don't. We cover all sides, no matter where it takes us. We are fearless, empowering, impartial. We tell your stories. We are your voice, your news, your network, Al Jazeera.
I've always been a hands-on journalist. Working in Asia and Africa, there'd be days where I'd be shooting and editing my own stories in a refugee camp with no electricity. And right now, we're confronting some of the greatest challenges that humanity's ever faced. And I really believe that the only way we can do that is with compassion and generosity and compromise. Because that's the only way we can try to solve any of these problems, is together. That's why Al Jazeera is so important. We make those connections.
Al Jazeera's correspondents bring you the latest developments on the war in Ukraine.
We had to take cover. This is what's happening on a daily basis.
The medics here say he is incredibly lucky.
Those coming out have to cross the lines alone in this no man's land.
We're one of the few to gain access to this embattled town. They take us to their basement, where we find others sheltering from the shelling.
These evacuees now face a 3-day journey.
Devastated buildings are now a grim reminder that the Russians were here.
I'm Kerry Johnson here in Doha. The top stories now on Al Jazeera. Top advisors to former US President Donald Trump say they told him his claims of widespread voter fraud were not legitimate. The statements were part of video testimony shown at a committee hearing into the attack on Capitol Hill on January the 6th last year. Trump has described the hearings as mockery of justice.
My belief, my recommendation was to say that votes were still being counted. It's too early to tell, too early to call the race, but you know, we proud of the race we ran, and we, you know, think we're in good position, and we'll have more to say about this, you know, the next day or the next day, whenever we had something to say.
Ukraine says Russia has destroyed the last bridge out of the eastern city of Severodonetsk. It's trapped any remaining civilians and making it impossible to deliver humanitarian supplies. Moscow-backed separatists claim Ukrainian troops are now effectively blockaded in the city, warning them to surrender or die. Amnesty International has accused Russia of war crimes for what it calls relentless shelling of Ukraine's second-largest city, Kharkiv. The rights group says it's found evidence that Moscow used cluster munitions and scatterable landmines. They cited one attack using cluster munitions on a playground that killed 9 people and wounded 35. The UK's Court of Appeal has rejected a request to halt the first flight deporting refugees and migrants to Rwanda. Human rights groups had asked the court to block the flight, scheduled to leave on Tuesday. It's thought no more than 11 people will be on board out of around 130 who'd been notified after a series of individual legal challenges. Police in Brazil are denying reports that the bodies of 2 men missing in the Amazon have been found. Leading indigenous rights expert Bruno Pereira and British journalist Dom Phillips disappeared a week ago while on a research trip. Local media quoting Phillips' wife said 2 bodies were found but haven't been identified. Sunday, some of their belongings were recovered. Those are the headlines. The news continues here on Al Jazeera. That's After Witness.
Oui. Bonjour à toi, oui, je sais. Je te passe l'enfant. Hein? Elle est à la maison, là. Elle est avec moi, là. Il est avec moi. Non, prends le courage, tu lui parles, hein? Hein? Pour qu'il puisse avoir un peu plus de courage. Bon, je te le passe, hein?
Mais à l'oreille.
Oui. Non, parce que... Allô? Allô? Maman? Oui, c'est moi, maman. Je vais entendre ta voix. Arrête de pleurer un petit moment. Maman. Oui, c'est moi, c'est moi. Tu as vu, j'ai jamais arrêté de te chercher. Tu as vu? Oui, c'est la même chose pour moi aussi. Allez, maman, calme-toi. Je suis venu ici pour te chercher, tu sais, pour te revoir. Je sais pas. Je sais pas, maman. Maman, je sais pas. Oui, maman. Ah oui? Mon petit frère, oh mon Dieu. Tu sais, je suis en train de vivre un moment de folie. Ça arrive tous ensemble dans... Oui, elle t'a toujours parlé de moi, maman. Sûrement, elle t'a toujours parlé de moi et... Oh, je suis tellement heureux d'entendre ta voix. Écoute, écoute, on fait comme ça, parce que maman, elle n'arrive même pas à parler maintenant. Demain, après-midi, on va encore s'appeler, ok?
Bien sûr, avec plaisir. C'est elle garde ton numéro. Non, par contre, elle demande juste où tu es logé parce qu'elle m'a dit ça rate de voir.
Ah oui, je suis logé à l'hôtel Olympique Palais. Palace. Olympique Palace.
D'accord, ok.
Et comme...
On transmettra certainement ton numéro à Sarah, qui est la dernière en fait, qui est la plus petite.
C'est bizarre, mais...
Oui.
Maman m'a appelé, je croyais que quelqu'un était mort. Mais...
Pour elle, c'est étrange parce qu'elle m'a jamais vu.
Non, mais c'est que son frère, il m'a dit, oui, il m'a dit.
Moi, je l'ai jamais vu, moi aussi.
Il m'a dit Christelle. J'ai dit,
Oui, on a entendu parler, mais on a cherché, Jean-Christophe est parti à Genève.
Ah oui.
On a dit que tu avais, d'abord que tu avais changé d'identité, tu voulais plus rien savoir d'elle, parce qu'elle t'avait abandonné. Et quand Jean-Christophe est parti à Genève, on lui a dit que tu étais décédé.
Moi, ça fait 40 ans que je suis en train de chercher la famille. 40 ans. J'ai jamais arrêté un seul jour. Mais maman, elle était fâchée avec Liliane. Je sais pas qui c'est, tante Liliane.
Elle avait dit que tu avais tout changé. Tu avais tout changé. Tu avais changé de nom, tu avais changé de prénom.
Non.
Et après, quand elle est décédée, je pense, en plus.
Liliane?
Oui, elle a dit que tu étais mort, que tu étais...
Elle était un ami à maman ou quoi?
Non,
moi, j'ai jamais su qui était Liliane.
Ah, c'était sa sœur.
Ah oui, ma tante.
Oui. Oui.
Oh là là.
Vous voulez vous asseoir un peu?
Oui, un petit moment, parce que là, c'est... Ouh.
C'est nous tous qui sommes...
Ah, maman, t'es obligée à venir ici.
Hein? Maman voulait se rassurer.
Elle voulait se rassurer.
Est-ce que c'est vrai?
C'était vraiment vrai, parce que pour elle, dans sa tête, on dit que son fils était mort.
Non, c'est ça. Elle veut se rassurer. Moi, je t'ai dit ça. Que maman, pour bien dormir, elle était obligée de dire, va voir. Mais ce qui rassurait maman, le fait que on a téléphoné depuis la maison ici. Hein, quand j'ai
Est-ce que c'est le ministre qui a appelé maman?
Parce qu'elle pleurait, je disais, mais maman, je comprends rien à ce que tu me dis en fait. Il est mort ou il est en vie? Elle dit, non, il est là. Je dis, mais pourquoi tu pleures s'il est en vie?
Maman? Non, allez.
Oui.
J'ai grandi bien quand même, tu vois? Maman! Ah, elle est trop émue. Oui, tu auras le temps de me raconter, ok? Salut papa, c'est moi.
Je suis le chef des Éolos.
Oui.
Les Éolos, la famille Éolo. C'est moi. Au village, je vais vous montrer les signes. Au village, on m'a donné le pouvoir de bénir tous ceux qui sont de la famille Éolo. Voilà. C'est mon enfant. Il vient, il était perdu. Le minimum, je dois le recevoir pour qu'il se sente en paix. Voilà. On va faire le rite. Venez. Voilà.
Et ça, c'est toi.
Voilà, ça c'est moi. Ça c'est ton papa. Il était le plus rieur de la famille. Hein? Il nous amusait beaucoup.
Waouh. Incroyable.
Tel que tu le vois, voilà, ton père était comme ça. Nous avons le même sang, les mêmes grands-parents. Je ne suis pas malade. Hein? J'ai une bonne santé. Hein? C'est au nom de la famille, du grand-père, Eolo Bernard, maman, Anna Régine. C'est Dieu qui leur a donné cette puissance-là. Donc tu vas venir, un genou, tu passes comme ça. Tu peux sortir et tu viens, tu t'assois seulement. Voilà, reviens. Tu peux t'asseoir. Ça va, tu t'assois chez toi là-bas. Voilà.
C'est incroyable que je suis passé par toi, que tu es le chef de la famille.
Oui.
Du moment que tu m'as béni,
oui.
Maman, papa, dit,
voilà.
Je rentre.
Maman, non. Déjà, j'ai dit à maman, maman viendra te chercher d'entre mes mains ce soir.
Oui.
Pas à Maya Maya, pas à l'aéroport, non, à la maison.
À la maison.
Et à la maison, on les reçoit. Ici, c'est un ancien cimetière, comme je t'ai dit, des Européens. Où on enterrait maintenant les Congolais aussi.
Oui.
Ouais, tombé de ton père. Eolo, Jean Richard. Mais il était encore à fleur d'âge. Il était encore tout jeune. Il avait peut-être 32 ans seulement.
Ah oui.
Quand il est mort.
C'est pour une maladie, pour...
Oui, pour maladie. Pour maladie. Bon, on va faire ce que, habituellement, dans nos villages, on fait. Hein? Bon, chez nous, quand il y a les morts, très souvent, on vient, on parle. Donc, Jean Richard, c'est ton fils, hein? Il a tout fait, ça fait 42 ans. Il cherche. Il est arrivé. Dieu merci, nous a trouvés pour qu'on t'amène là. Nous avons fait, j'ai fait ce que je pouvais faire pour qu'il retrouve la sérénité dans la famille. Comme tu aimais la bière, je t'ai amené ça. Comme on fait toujours. Toi aussi, tu tournes un peu autour. Tourne. Il était parti en Europe, il avait peut-être 2 ans, quand sa tante l'avait amené. Donc depuis 2 ans, c'est maintenant qu'il revient. Voilà, tu prends ça.
J'ai vu les photos, je n'arrive pas à oublier ton sourire, ta joie de vivre. Maintenant, je me sens un peu quand même, je sais que je t'ai retrouvé. Et ton esprit va être toujours avec moi maintenant. On ne va plus se quitter à jamais. Merci de m'avoir mis au monde. Merci, papa.
sors pas.
Salut. Soyez bienvenus.
Voilà ta maman.
Allez, moi je l'ai vu avant. J'ai eu le même sentiment. Hein? Bon. Il fallait qu'on y arrive quand même, non? Il fallait que ça soit comme ça.
Christelle. Mon Dieu. Oh mon Dieu. Mon Dieu. Hey. Hey.
Tu vas t'asseoir. Asseyez-vous là. Asseyez-vous là. Asseyez-vous là. Assieds-toi là. Asseyez-vous là. Asseyez-vous là. Asseyez-vous là. Asseyez-vous là. Asseyez-vous. Voilà, asseyez-vous.
Mon Dieu. Mon Dieu, mon Dieu, mon Dieu.
Fallait que ça arrive quand même.
Seigneur. Mon Dieu, mon Dieu, mon Dieu, mon Dieu. Mon Dieu. Ah, Seigneur. Hey, hey, hey.
Lève-toi.
Oh, mon Dieu. Hey, Dieu, mon Dieu. Mon Dieu, mon Dieu. Ah, Seigneur. Ah, Nzambe. Oh Seigneur. Hey.
Ce que l'on cherchait, c'est ça, hein? En commençant par nous. Ça fait longtemps que tu as pleuré, c'est normal. Douleur du nez, c'est ça? C'est normal?
Ma vie. J'ai pleuré toute ma vie.
Oui, c'est normal.
Tu fais ce que l'homme ne peut pas faire. Tu es le Dieu de l'impossible. Ce qui est impossible aux hommes est possible à Dieu éternel, notre Dieu. Seigneur, je te rends grâce en ces jours. Tu t'es souvenu de moi, ta servante, Seigneur, de toutes ces années que j'ai pleuré. Éternel, je me suis donné à toi pour te servir.
Attention, pense. Ça glisse peut-être aussi. Hein. Santé. Mia madre da giovane. Ça, c'est maman quand est-ce qu'elle était jeune. Tu vois? Elle était super jolie, hein?
C'est la seule chose que j'ai depuis 40 ans. J'ai cette photo. Voilà.
Faut que tu me racontes un peu.
C'est toi qui as me raconté, c'est toi.
Oui.
Toi. C'est toi, le jour que tu as pris l'avion, tu es parti avec elle, c'était comment? C'est toi qui dois me raconter.
Mais moi, je me rappelle rien, j'étais tellement petit.
Tu es arrivé, tu s'est passé, t'as abandonné, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? Comment ça?
Là, ensuite, je sais pas. Oui, on en parlera parce que moi, quand je suis parti ici, je me rappelle rien. Elle t'a même pas dit où est-ce que moi, là,
Elle m'a dit que vous allez en Suisse. Elle va revenir, c'est ce qu'elle m'avait dit.
Elle m'a fait passer une vie d'enfer. Elle me frappait tout le temps, ça, je me rappelle beaucoup. Je sais pas pourquoi, je rentrais de l'école, elle me frappait 2 ou 3 jours. Je me suis dit, elle me tachait. Je dis, mais pourquoi? J'ai passé avec elle une vie d'enfer. Hein. Elle m'a fait croire que c'était toi qui ne me voulais pas. Je dis, mais c'est impossible, une mère ne peut pas refuser son enfant comme ça. Je ne comprends pas pourquoi elle a fait ça à toi, à moi.
À moi-même, je ne sais pas pourquoi elle me l'a fait. Si sachant qu'elle voulait faire ça, pourquoi t'avoir pris et t'amener? Moi, et puis moi, je ne vivais même plus chez elle quand elle t'a pris. Elle m'avait chassé de la maison, je vivais chez une copine qui m'avait accueillie.
Elle avait le droit de prendre cette décision.
Quand elle me l'a dit, c'est pas pour te... C'est quelqu'un qui vient, c'est comme si elle voulait me rendre service. Quand elle est venue me parler, c'est comme si elle voulait me rendre service. Je dis non, je trouve que tu vas à l'école et l'enfant et tout, bon, laisse-moi partir avec l'enfant, mais de toute façon, on va revenir. Et moi, j'ai donné l'enfant, parce que c'est ma soeur. Je me dis, c'est pas quelqu'un qui va me faire du mal. Pour moi, je comprends que dans le temps, quand une jeune fille enceinte, les parents avaient honte et tout. Elle m'a demandé d'enlever, j'ai refusé d'enlever, d'avorter. Bon, elle m'a chassée, après elle m'a repris. Et le papa avait peur que son grand frère sache qu'il a engrossé une fille parce qu'il vivait dans la maison. Il a eu peur. Donc je me suis retrouvée toute seule, quoi. Je crois il y a 5 ans, 6 ans, on m'appelle, il y a une de ses copines qui m'appelle. Oh non, Liliane, on l'a aperçue, tout ça là. Je pourrais même te donner le gars. Tu as aperçu Liliane? Tu l'as aperçue où? Oh, je l'ai aperçue parce qu'elle a un problème avec les autorités suisses. Donc il y a Djabasi, Atinandako, après, il y a eu des problèmes bizarres. Oh non, parce qu'elle a des problèmes avec l'État suisse et tout. Je dis, ah bon? Mais un enfant. Ah, naïvité, hein? Elle me donne le numéro. J'essaie d'appeler, hein? Inconnu. Numéro inconnu. Un an après, oh non, tu sais, la grande sœur, il faut être fort. Elle était morte il y a 6 mois. Après, on l'a enterrée parce qu'ici, vraiment, il y avait trop de problèmes. Je dis, quoi? Morte, enterrée. Donc, je dis, Liliane est partie dans sa tombe avec le secret de mon fils. Donc, ça veut dire, est-ce qu'il l'avait tué? Est-ce qu'on l'avait tué? Il était mort. Mon tant mieux même me dire que je sois au moins. Donc, je ne sais pas. Est-ce qu'il vit? Est-ce qu'il est mort? Là où tu étais, tu vivais des difficultés. Là où j'étais, je vivais des difficultés. Mais c'est un temps qui est passé. Il a fallu que cela sorte. Parce que ce qui va commencer maintenant, ça va être le feu. Ça va être quelque chose de fort. Mais si seulement tu ne pardonnes pas, tu n'enlèves pas ça de toi pour guérir tes blessures internes, ça risque de te détruire. Faites vos rêves. Ok.
À demain.
Dors, il faut dormir.
Oui, non, je suis vraiment fatigué.
Tu dors. D'accord?
Oui.
Salut, jeune homme. C'est un orphelin qu'on nous a amené. Hein? Ça va? Ça va?
Elle a grossi. Elle est née avant le terme. Et elle a 4 mois. On dirait pas, hein?
Non.
Oui.
4 mois.
4 mois, ouais.
Elle a eu ses 4 mois ici.
Et sa mère avait 14 ans quand elle a eu. Et elle est décédée.
Oh là là.
Oui. Et elle s'appelle Gracia, non? Gracia comme sa mère.
Faut pas trop la couvrir. On a envie de faire le village de l'enfant. Pas que la maison.
On est dans des blancs. C'est incroyable.
Voilà.
Bravo, maman. Bravo.
Voilà.
Wow.
Donc, quand toi, on te recevait dans un orphelinat, ta mère a eu un coup de cœur où le Seigneur m'a dit, je veux que tu fasses une maison pour mes enfants.
C'est super comme endroit. Voilà. C'est vraiment comme être à la maison.
Mon cœur disait, fais comme si tu faisais pour un de tes enfants. J'ai mon enfant, j'aimerais pas qu'il dorme dans une maison moche, un lit moche, des draps moches. Je fais comme si c'était toi.
Mi viene da pensare a tutte le madri d'Africa costrette a perdere i figli e l'eco incessante del loro grido affinché tornino a casa.
Hello, welcome to another look at the international forecast. The heat really remains a major concern across a good part of North America, particularly across the US over the next couple of days. Little weather fronts wriggling away somewhat further north, pushing up towards the plains, towards the prairies. We have got some wetter weather in play here, but it's about that heat, that extreme heat, record-breaking heat, well into the 30s, some places touching the 40s, somewhat more wintry. Notice over towards the northwest, some cooler air is in place. If only it would be rather more spread out. Cold enough for some snow over the Canadian Rockies, maybe around the mountain states of the US. Certainly some very heavy rain through the prairies, easing further eastward. Some lively showers down towards the southeast, hot, humid and pretty wet. Thundery downpours for the southeastern corner of the US on Tuesday afternoon. But the heat, that's very much in place across those central parts. That wetter weather, you can see that hook of wetter weather just making its way around that western side of the lakes, just pushing up through Lake Superior, easing into central parts of Canada as we go on through Wednesday. It's largely dry and hot, plenty of sunshine further west. Plenty of sunshine coming down across a good part of Mexico, then the usual scattering of showers for the Caribbean.
Societies only change because some people believe in a purpose that is bigger than them.
I'm about to make a political move in my city. I'm about to run for state representative.
They put themselves out there to make the changes.
Something that we've done collectively has worked. It shouldn't have taken this long that we recognize women's contribution, black contribution.
We have this culture to slash and burn to create new areas. We have to change this culture.
I am one of the fortunate ones who can leave and establish myself outside, but all these people cannot.
That majority of these illegal immigrants they're talking about are just good, hardworking people that want to live the American dream like our ancestors did.
These Rohingya refugees are terrified that they may be forced to return to Myanmar.
Al Jazeera, wherever you are.
He's become detached from reality.
Donald Trump's Attorney General describes how the former president clung to outlandish and dangerous theories before the Capitol attack. I'm Kerry Johnston. This is Al Jazeera Live from Doha. Also coming up, pro-Moscow separatists tell Ukrainian forces to surrender or die after Russia destroys the last bridge out of an eastern city. New scrutiny around the secretive world of artificial intelligence after a Google system is described as being self-aware. And Australia beat Peru in a penalties thriller to confirm a place at the Football World Cup in Qatar.
And from Sydney to Perth.
Former US Attorney General William Barr has described watching Donald Trump become detached from reality while refusing to accept his 2020 election loss. He and the former president's family members have been among the latest testimony heard by the committee investigating last year's Capitol Hill riot. Heidi Jo Castro reports now from Washington, D.C.
The January 6th committee opened public hearing number 2 with a focus on election night 2020 inside the White House, where Donald Trump and his advisors watched the election returns with increasing worry.
The Fox News Decision Desk is calling Arizona for Joe Biden. That is a big get for the Biden campaign.
Did that shift the atmosphere, the attitude in the White House?
Completely. It was becoming clear that the race would not be called on election night.
Witnesses say Trump was livid and ignored their advice to wait before making a public statement. They said he instead turned to his private attorney, Rudy Giuliani, who was described as drunk.
The mayor was definitely intoxicated. Mayor Giuliani was saying, "We want it. They're stealing it from us. Where'd all the votes come from? We need to go say that we won." And essentially that anyone who didn't agree with that position was being weak.
A defiant Trump then declared his false victory.
We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election.
This was the Fox News political editor, later fired from his job after calling Arizona for Biden.
After the election, as of November 7th, in your judgment, what were the chances of President Trump winning the election?
After that point?
Yes.
None.
In the weeks that followed, Trump would continue to spread the lies of widespread voter fraud, despite being told by Attorney General William Barr that the claim was bogus.
I was somewhat demoralized because I thought, boy, if he really believes this stuff, he has, lost contact with he's become detached from reality.
Over and over, witnesses testified that Trump refused to accept his election defeat, despite the growing evidence otherwise.
Not only was there not evidence of 8,000 dead voters voting in Pennsylvania, there wasn't evidence of 8.
The former president's media campaign spread the election falsehoods, invigorating his base. Supporters donated $250 million to Trump's so-called Election Defense Fund. Investigators testified the fund didn't exist and that some of the money went to Trump's hotel collection and the event company that organized the January 6th rally.
Not only was there the big lie, there was the big ripoff.
The committee plans another half-dozen public hearings to connect the election lies with the violence of January 6th. They say evidence will show that Trump tried to corrupt the Justice Department, and when that failed, assembled the mob that would try to keep him in power by force. Heidi Jo Castro, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, Harry Litman served as U.S. Deputy Assistant Attorney General under former President Bill Clinton. He now hosts the political podcast Talking Feds. And he joins us from La Jolla in California via Skype. Thanks for being with us here on Al Jazeera. So just how revealing has this testimony been in terms of what was going on behind the scenes?
You know, it seems fairly devastating to me. Both of these last hearings have been chock full of evidence. They've stayed at the themes that they've chosen, but they also peppered it with real new revelations. And, you know, today we had I think the emerging theme was team normal versus team crazy. Basically, every grown-up in the room told Trump that there was nothing whatsoever, not even a scintilla, to his assertions of fraud. And the only people who said otherwise were ones that he sort of dredged up specifically because they would propound the big lie, including in court. And now several of them are in criminal jeopardy and jeopardy of losing their license. So today I thought was very stark in its identification of just who the grown-ups in the room, all of whom were saying, forget about this, Mr. President, and then the others who were for Trump sort of ports in the storm, anyone who would tell him what he wanted to hear.
Does any of this, though, really damage Donald Trump in any way, the Trump brand, as it were?
We're in a world of hurt in the country. So much of it lays out a potential criminal case, but even setting that aside, in sort of reliving the hell of January 6th and everything that led up to it, if enough people, and I don't think it would take that many because he was already governing by a razor's edge and a minority vote, come to understand that it wasn't just that he propounded a big lie, but did it with really tremendous damage to our political life. And then you heard Congresswoman Lofgren, he ripped off his most strong supporters and shook them down for another $20, $25. I think if it wouldn't take that many people to say that this is really reprehensible and whatever else we're going to be thinking about going forward, Trump really hoodwinked us. I think it could matter. And again, if it doesn't, this is a constitutional moment involving the American people. And if they continue to embrace in enough numbers to make him an electoral force, the autocracy of Trump after being shown what it amounts to, the country's in trouble.
Realistically, though, where do you think this is going to go in terms of the investigation? What's likely to be the end result of all of this?
The end result, and this is important in and of itself, Kerry, is just a full report of what happened and hopefully a scrutiny of it by enough people to change the weight of opinion here. There's also, of course, the possibility of a criminal case by the Department of Justice, which is a avid listener here and will receive all this evidence on the other end. I think it would be a mistake to put all our eggs in the basket of, looking to the department to be the avenging angel, as it were. But if nowhere else, it goes to history and something we don't have now as full possible an official account of this horrific episode in U.S. history, second, if even second, to what happened in the Civil War, and an effort here by the sitting president to prevent the peaceful transition of power for the first time in U.S. history. We just need a chronicle of that, if nothing else.
Okay, Harry Litman, we appreciate your time here on Al Jazeera. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Moscow-backed separatists say Russia has destroyed the last bridge out of Severodonetsk in eastern Ukraine. The city is at the center of the battle for the Donbas region. Russia says Ukrainian troops are now effectively blockaded and should surrender or die. The destroyed bridge links Severodonetsk to a neighboring city, and Russia is bombarding its Azot chemical plant with artillery. Many civilians are said to be sheltering there in a situation likened to the steelworks siege in Mariupol.
Severodonetsk has practically been blocked after they blew up the last bridge which connected it to Lysychansk. Those Ukrainian divisions that are there forever. They have two options, either to follow the example of their fellow servicemen and surrender, or to die. There is no other option.
Well, Charles Stratford is covering developments from Kyiv.
Potentially a very dire situation in that city, Severodonetsk, one of two cities that the Russians are not in full control of in the region of Lugansk in Donbass. We've actually spoken to a deputy commander who is serving, a Ukrainian deputy commander serving in Severodonetsk. He's saying that indeed that third and last bridge had been hit this morning. We understand by Russian forces, but we cannot confirm as to whether that bridge has been completely and utterly destroyed. Now, If indeed it has huge implications, obviously, for the Ukrainian forces, military and fighters inside that city in terms of getting military supplies across that river to them, and potentially for an escape route if they retreat. It also has huge implications for what we understand, or what we're being told, are up to around 10,000 civilians inside the city. Now, according to the head of Lugansk Regional Administration, Military Regional Administration, he's saying that there are around about 500 civilians sheltering underneath that chemical plant, the Azot chemical plant that we know has come under heavy shelling, according to the Ukrainians in recent days. He's saying that there could be up to 40 children also in and amongst those civilians.
A British judge has thrown out attempts to halt the deportation of refugees and migrants to Rwanda, but more legal challenges are planned. The first flight is scheduled to take off on Tuesday. Laura Burden-Manley reports.
Shame on you! Shame on you!
A chorus of anger from protesters outside London's Court of Appeal as a judge gave the green light for the first flight of refugees and migrants to Rwanda. Rights groups say it includes people who had escaped war in Afghanistan and Syria, and being flown more than 6,000 kilometres away will traumatise them further.
They've suffered incredibly. They've seen family members killed. They've had torture themselves. They are tired. They're at the end of their tether. They're finding detention incredibly traumatising, and the thought of a further deportation halfway across the road is absolutely terrifying for them.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says a deportation strategy will undermine people smuggling networks and deter refugees from making dangerous journeys to Britain. The United Nations Refugee Agency hit back, saying Rwanda's human rights record is under scrutiny and the UK is shirking responsibility.
This is all wrong. This is all wrong, this deal. You know, it is the foundation of the right to asylum that people that are on a country's territory, especially a country that is a signatory to the convention and has the institutions to deal with that.
In April, Home Secretary Priti Patel visited Kigali to finalise the project and potentially send tens of thousands of people there. The deal includes a payment of about $150 million to the Rwandan government. So far this year, 10,000 migrants and refugees made the crossing from mainland Europe to the UK, and 28,000 last year. In November, 27 people drowned when their dinghy deflated, and many more have had to be rescued from the channel's busy shipping lanes. Some of those who risked their lives will leave on the first flight on Tuesday, but there may not be many on it. A series of individual legal challenges mean only a few of the 130 people notified will leave. And the government continues to face pressure from activists, rights groups and unions who insist the move is unlawful. Laura Burden-Manley, Al Jazeera.
Well, in the news ahead, the search goes on for an indigenous expert and a journalist missing in the Amazon after some of their belongings are found. And life inside the blockaded city in Yemen, where daily life has been a struggle for years.
The journey has begun. The FIFA World Cup is on its way to Qatar. Book your travel package today.
Hello. We've got more very heavy rain pushing across southern parts of China. Big massive cloud here. That is the Mayu front, of course, the plum rains, and that's still pulsing that really wet weather out across southern and eastern parts of China, linked up to this area of low pressure, which is pulling out of the way, but it's dragging that rain across southern parts of Japan. South Korea also seeing some rather lively showers. We've got some showers there into eastern China, pushing right up across the far northeast of the country. We will see some wetter weather too into Beijing for a time. That will clear through as we go on through Wednesday. The wetter weather, the livelier showers just pushing across the Korean Peninsula back into Japan. Tokyo with around 21 Celsius, not too bad, but not as warm as it has been recently. Meanwhile, the wet weather continues across southern parts, more flooding concerns coming through here. Meanwhile, for Southeast Asia, it's the usual case of sunshine and those heat of the day showers, good scattering of seasonal showers coming through here. So nothing unusual going on. And a similar picture as we go on through Wednesday. Now, we have seen some wet weather into southern parts of India, of course. The monsoon rains, they should be coming through Hyderabad into Andhra Pradesh. They're a little late here, but pretty much where they should be, north and east.
Qatar Airways, official airline of the journey.
I've worked at Al Jazeera English since its launch as a principal presenter and as a correspondent. With any breaking news story, we want to hear from those people who would normally not get their voices heard on an international news channel. One moment I'll be very proud of was when we covered the Nepal earthquake of 2015, a terrible natural disaster and a story that needed to be told from the heart of the affected area. To be there and to tell the people's story was very important at the time.
You're watching Al Jazeera, a reminder of our top stories now. Top advisors to former US President Donald Trump so they told him his claims of widespread voter fraud were not legitimate. The statements were part of video testimony shown at a committee hearing into the attack on Capitol Hill on January the 6th last year. Ukraine says Russia has destroyed the last bridge out of the eastern city of Severodonetsk. Moscow-backed separatists claim Ukrainian troops are now effectively blockaded in the city, warning them to surrender or die. The UK's Court of Appeal has rejected a request to halt the first flight deporting refugees and migrants to Rwanda. Human rights groups had asked the court to block the flight scheduled to leave on Tuesday. Now, police in Brazil are denying reports that the bodies of two men missing in the Brazilian Amazon have been found. Indigenous rights expert Bruno Pereira and British journalist Dom Phillips disappeared while on a research trip. Monica Inakiev reports from Rio de Janeiro.
Hundreds of indigenous protesters took to the streets of Atalaia do Norte. They demanded justice for indigenous expert Bruno Pereira and British journalist Dom Phillips. They went missing a week ago while they were returning from an expedition to the Javari Valley Reservation, home to the largest number of uncontacted tribes in the world. Where are Bruno and Dom, they chanted. But the demonstrators also denounced the onslaught they have been suffering from illegal fishermen, poachers, loggers, and miners. Bruno Pereira had been helping them patrol their territory and map the invasions. Dom Phillips was accompanying him on a trip to finish writing a book on how to save the Amazon. On Sunday, after a week-long search, divers retrieved a plastic bag from the river containing a backpack and some belongings of the two missing men.
Relatives say the backpack contained a computer, all belongings, socks, shirts, shorts, their work tools such as their laptops.
Reports on Monday morning that two bodies had also been found were denied by Brazil's federal police. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro said he thought something evil had happened to them.
The evidence leads us to believe that something bad was done to them because human viscera were floating in the river.
Indigenous leaders we spoke to said they will keep up the pressure to find out what happened to Dom Phillips and Bruno Pereira, and that they will continue the patrols that Pereira organized to help protect the rainforest. Monica Yanakiev, Al Jazeera, Rio de Janeiro.
Now, a Google engineer has been ordered to take leave after claiming a computer system he was interacting with is self-aware. Blake Lemoine works on Google's artificial intelligence, or AI, team. He released transcripts between himself and the company's chatbot development system. Lemoine says it has thoughts and feelings that are like those of a young child. Well, in one exchange, Lemoine says the system expressed a fear of being switched off. It would be exactly like death for me. It would scare me a lot. He says it also told him, I want everyone to understand that I am, in fact, a person. The nature of my consciousness, sentience, is that I am aware of my existence. I desire to learn more about the world, and I feel happy or sad at times. Well, Google says it put Blake Lemoine on paid leave for publishing the conversations online, which breached confidentiality policies. A spokesman told the Washington Post, "Our team, including ethicists and technologists, has reviewed Blake's concerns per our AI principles. We've informed him that the evidence does not support his claims." Well, Emily Bender is a professor of computational linguistics at the University of Washington. She also doesn't believe the engineer, but says his assertions are prompting important discussions about AI.
There's huge issues around transparency because we're creating systems that can produce coherent seeming text, and as we see, can fool people into thinking that they are sentient, that they have consciousness, or that they're even intelligent. And therein lies many, many problems. So what we need is the producers of these systems to create them with transparency so that it is clear to the users what their actual capabilities are. I think there's not enough scrutiny, largely because a lot of this research is happening behind closed doors in large companies that are sitting on very large amounts of data that they've collected that are not available to the public to explore or to outside auditors to explore, and with amounts of computing resources that others don't have access to as well. We have to be very clear about what we mean by the term AI. Right now, we have pattern recognition systems that companies and governments will use, taking large collections of data, finding patterns in them, and then making decisions for actual people that impact their lives based on that data. And that's a big problem. We need to know what those data sets are, what the patterns are, and we need to have recourse if we don't like the decisions being made. But it's not actually intelligence, and AI is a misnomer for all of this. There are some very nice use cases, things like automatic transcription, things like machine translation, so long as they're being used in ways where people know that it's a machine, that it can make mistakes, and to not take everything it says as the actual truth of what it's transcribing or translating.
Reopening blocked roads and supply routes is part of the UN-brokered truce between Yemen's warring sides in place since April. But the Houthi rebels' siege of Taiz remains in place, compounding the misery of those stuck inside the city. Katia Lopez-Holayan reports.
Living under a blockade in Yemen's third-largest city, Taiz, is a burden Ahmed has been dealing with for years. The challenges are many. Visiting relatives who live beyond city limits is just one of them.
I live about 1 kilometer away from my family, but because of the blockade, I have to go through rough and dangerous roads. It takes me about 5 hours to get to my parents' house to see my mother and father.
Road closures have left thousands of people with limited access to medicine, proper medical services, and international aid. The blockade imposed by Houthi rebels in 2016 has essentially closed off the main routes that lead to the city, making an already dire humanitarian crisis worse. Protests demanding an end to the blockade have failed. A recent UN-brokered truce was extended in early June for 2 months. It's noticeably reduced tensions between Houthi rebels and the Saudi-led coalition, but the city remains closed, and its fragile economy is feeling the hit.
Road closures have led to a spike in the price of goods. Transporting costs with trucks is a serious problem. Drivers have to go through rugged terrain and distant roads. It's yet another added burden.
About 600,000 people live here. Isolation from the rest of the country and the world is taking its toll.
If a merchant orders 100 boxes of eggs, he can expect about 10 of them to be damaged because of the rough roads. So that automatically means extra costs. And then there's the money that must be paid at checkpoints.
For years, people living here have been shut out. Now they hope the truce will help change that. Katia Lopez-Holayan, Al Jazeera.
Al Jazeera Media Network continues to demand a rapid, independent and transparent investigation into the killing of its journalist in the occupied West Bank. Shireen Abu Akleh was shot in the head by Israeli forces while she was on assignment in Jenin. On the day of her funeral, Israeli forces stormed the procession and started beating mourners, causing pallbearers to almost drop her casket. That didn't stop thousands of Palestinians from marching through occupied East Jerusalem to take part in her funeral and burial. Members of the international community have condemned her killing. and continue to call for an investigation. Abu Akleh was with Al Jazeera for 25 years, covering the story of the Israeli occupation. She was known as the Voice of Palestine. The UK government has introduced legislation to change post-Brexit trading rules for Northern Ireland. The bill includes proposals to do away with checks on most goods crossing between Britain and Northern Ireland, which were agreed under the Brexit deal signed in 2019. UK ministers argue the current arrangements are a threat to peace and stability. The EU has warned of legal action if the UK tries to alter the protocol. Now, Australia have qualified for this year's World Cup in Qatar. They beat Peru in a penalty shootout. Well, in a moment, Mariana Sanchez will report on the disappointment in Lima. First, though, Andy Richardson wraps up the game from Doha.
There was a big welcome for the thousands of Peru fans who made the trip to Qatar for this World Cup playoff against Australia. Peru hoping to repeat their exploits of 2018 when they returned to football's biggest stage for the first time in almost 4 decades.
I've been in Russia, I've been in Brazil, I've been in the USA. Qatar is just another place where my team is going to play. So whatever my team is, I will do my best to be there.
More countries playing this chance to go to a World Cup, and we will do it. So it's something important for us. It's not just a soccer game, it's more than that. For people who think it's just a soccer game, no, you're wrong. Absolutely wrong.
These teams did meet at the group stage in Russia 4 years ago. On that occasion, Peru secured a 2-0 victory. This time out, World Cup qualification was on the line. With so much at stake, the first half passed with no more than half chances exchanged. Fear of defeat surpassing the desire to take too many risks.
The first Peruvian chance of the night falls to Lapadula.
Ian Hurstich scored the winner for Australia in their playoff against the UAE last week. He went close to repeating that feat late in the second half. After 90 minutes, the teams were locked at 0-0. Peru went close to grabbing a winner in extra time, but penalties would decide this playoff.
Back off the post!
Australia sent on goalkeeper Andrew Redmayne specifically for the shootout, and he it was who proved to be his country's match winner. Australia on their way to the World Cup for a 5th straight time.
Andrew Redmayne is their hero. It's only his 3rd appearance with the national team.
To try and get into the mind on the mental aspect for Peru, that why we're making that change, to add that little bit of uncertainty in their brains.
Since reaching the last 16 at the 2006 World Cup, Australia have failed to reach the knockout rounds at subsequent World Cups. In November, they'll once again face France and Denmark, 2 of the teams they failed to beat in 2018. Tunisia will be their other group stage opponents. Andy Richardson, Al Jazeera, Doha.
With the last penalty here, the crowd, a huge crowd, thousands of fans here in the center of Miraflores who were ecstatic with the game, went completely silent. There was disbelief and tears followed for many after 3 long, nerve-wracking hours of this game. There was so much expectation to win this entry to the next World Cup. The country was mainly paralyzed. The government declared a holiday, and for many, it was the most important day of their lives in many years.
I feel disappointed. I expected much more from Peru. Australia is not the greatest soccer team. The truth is, I feel very sad. It takes away the illusion of everything. I think we could have done much more.
In this country, immersed in political upheaval, many say that this loss will be significant.
For the fan, today was a special day, right? The soccer is a moment for the fan, for the Peruvian fan, and forgot the social problems, the economy, the political situation, because it's very difficult today.
However, not everyone is sad. A small group decided to celebrate a team that has taken Peru to the doorstep of another World Cup.
You're with Al Jazeera, and these are the top stories now. Top advisors to former US President Donald Trump said they told him his claims of widespread voter fraud were not legitimate. The statements were part of video testimony shown at a committee hearing into the attack on Capitol Hill on January the 6th last year.
My belief, my recommendation was to say that votes were still being counted. It's too early to tell, too early to call the race, but you know, we proud of the race we ran, and we, you know, think we're in good position, and we'll have more to say about this, you know, the next day or the next day, whenever we had something to say.
Ukraine says Russia has destroyed the last bridge out of the eastern city of Severodonetsk. Moscow-backed separatists claim Ukrainian troops are now effectively blockaded in the city, warning them to surrender or die. Ukraine says there is another way out, but it's been severely damaged. The UK's Court of Appeal has rejected a request to halt the first flight deporting refugees and migrants to Rwanda. Human rights groups had asked the court to block the flight, scheduled to leave on Tuesday. It's thought no more than 11 people will be on board after a series of individual legal challenges. Police in Brazil are denying reports that the bodies of 2 men missing in the Amazon have been found. Leading indigenous rights expert Bruno Pereira and British journalist Dom Phillips disappeared a week ago while on a research trip. Local media, quoting Phillips' wife, said 2 bodies were found but haven't been identified. On Sunday, some of their belongings were recovered in the search area, including a backpack and a laptop. The UK government has introduced new legislation to change post-Brexit trading rules for Northern Ireland. The EU has warned it will take legal action if the UK tries to alter parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol on its own. Northern Ireland's pro-British Democratic Unionist Party is strongly opposed to the existing agreement. There's a risk of a trade war if no solution is found. Those are the headlines, and news continues here on Al Jazeera. That's after 101 East.
We understand the differences and similarities of cultures across the world. So no matter what moves you, Al Jazeera will bring you the news and current affairs that matter to you. Al Jazeera.
In the Swiss city of Geneva, thousands of undocumented workers aren't able to legally rent a home. Instead, they're forced to rely on so-called slumlords, paying them exorbitant prices to live in overcrowded apartments.
It is not an easy earn money. It is like blood and sweat for us. The only solution for us to find a place is to share.
Some slumlords rent out dozens of properties to vulnerable workers.
She doesn't give receipts when she gets the payment. She only gives like a text message like, thank you for the food. It is a sign that she got the money.
101 East meets the Filipino tenants being exploited in one of the world's richest countries. In downtown Geneva, Cecilia shares a 40-square-metre, one-bedroom apartment.
This is Marianne, and this is Marina. This is Judith. That's me and the couples behind. There are 6 people in this room.
Cecilia's flatmates are all Filipino. They only come home at night. The official rent for the apartment is about $1,200 a month, but the 6 tenants pay more than $2,200, almost double. The difference is kept by the landlady.
We have to bear with each other. So it is not like it is my own room that I can have my own privacy. It is not like that. If you want to be alone, you can go to the park, you can take a walk, just like that. So how's everyone? Uncle and auntie? They're okay?
Yeah, Uncle's taking care of the chicken.
Cecilia is 48 years old and has 2 children who are studying back in the Philippines. She came to Switzerland to make money to send home for their education.
I haven't seen my family for 4 years already. And it is really difficult for a mom to be away from them. It is heartbreaking, I say, because I was not able to witness their lives. They go to school. I wasn't able to. I wasn't there to prepare their food, to greet them when they come home, to send them to school. You know, as a mom, I miss all those opportunities. But then. It is really tough, but you know, we need help. For the family I have to do this. So I decided to come and work. We cannot afford to pay for the whole apartment because it's very expensive. So the only solution for us to find a place is to share.
Across town, this duplex is managed by the same landlady. It's Sunday, Lorna and Lisa's day off.
All you have in store for me is good. It's good. Yes, Lord, yes, Lord, yes, yes, Lord, amen.
They're following an evangelical service back home in the Philippines. They live in this small apartment with 9 others. Together, they pay the landlady about $6,500 a month, nearly double the market rent.
Well, it's really difficult because half of our salary we need to pay to the house. For our room is 1,100 for
the
2
rest
persons.
also.
This 125 square metre apartment has 5 bedrooms and only 1 common room, a small kitchen. To stay out of each other's way, they meticulously time their activities according to a tight schedule.
I am the first one who woke up in the morning at around 5 p.m. because we have our own schedule. For me, because I am the first one, so I have to wake up 5 in the morning, and I'm using the bathroom for 30 minutes. So after that, I need to lay down again with my bed because it's too early for me to go to work.
Sometimes at 7:30 or 8 o'clock, there's no hot water anymore. So we need to heat from the broiler to use hot water for those unluckily who are not having the bath. During summer, it's very, very hot. And now it's winter, this heater is not working. We cannot cook all together. We have to schedule. We are all doing miserable here for all of us in 11 who are living here.
Lorna has never seen her grandchildren in person. She came to Switzerland 9 years ago to support her family. An agency based in the Philippines' capital, Manila, organised her travel and put her in contact with the landlady.
It cost 15,000 francs, or some. It depends upon the processing of the papers, because we don't have any. We don't do anything. All are for the agency. We just have to give the initial payment, and after that, if everything is already okay, they arrange everything.
Lorna's still paying back the agency. Her financial situation is precarious, largely because of the amount of rent she pays. But she has little choice. If she, Lisa and the others want to stay here, they have to pay. undocumented in Switzerland doesn't just affect accommodation, it's also impossible to have a legal job. All these women are informal domestic workers. Cecilia's a cleaner in this upmarket apartment.
I do part-time jobs, so I am doing cleaning, housekeeping for 4 hours, and in the afternoon I have to pick up kids, okay, bring them from school to home and play with them for an hour. I work like 8 hours a day from Monday to Friday. I get to earn like a decent amount, 2005, 2003, and then I have to pay my rent, which is 340. I have to pay my bills. I have to buy for my food. It is not an easy earn money. It is like blood and sweat for us. So every cent should be spent wisely also.
Cecilia spent 11 years working in South Korea before coming to Switzerland, attracted by the higher wages. But she was quickly reminded of her vulnerable position.
They don't treat you as an employee. They treat you as a slave. It's like anytime they tell you you have to be there, you have to come now. It's like people cannot wait. And sometimes we don't get paid the right way, the right amount. It is always in a bargain situation. It is like take it or leave it situation. But because we're already here, we don't have a choice.
Lorna earns about $3,000 a month. She babysits, often 7 days a week, even following her employers on vacation. But the COVID-19 pandemic has made her work more irregular.
Merci beaucoup. Not for the whole week, but at least the half of our food we need in 1 week, we can get there in Caravan.
Since 2015, the aid group Solidarity Caravan has given essentials to those in need. It's seen an explosion of people needing help during the pandemic. One of the co-founders of the organization is Filipino activist Charlie Hernandez. He's well aware of how precarious the lives of his countrymen and women are.
Ils ont un emploi, mais ce n'est pas un emploi régulier. Et souvent, c'est découpé en 1000 morceaux. Vous avez un emploi à 20% ici, 10% là. Donc si vous tournez déjà à 1800, malgré toute l'ingénuité des Philippins et des Latinos et tous les autres migrants, vous perdez juste 200 francs, donc un petit micro-emploi parmi les 4 que vous avez, et c'est déjà la crise existentielle. C'est les meilleurs travailleurs pour l'économie genevoise. Ils ne coûtent rien, ils essaient de ne jamais tomber malades, ils occupent très peu d'espace. Imaginez un appartement, un tout petit appartement de 2 pièces, il a 5 personnes, 6 personnes là-dedans. Donc, ils sont parfaits.
And outside of the legal housing market, these workers are vulnerable to exploitation by slumlords. Alessandro De Filippo coordinates a support network for undocumented foreigners in Geneva. 1/3 of those who come to him are Filipino.
N'ayant pas de permis, vous ne pouvez pas vous inscrire auprès d'une régie, encore moins auprès d'un logement social. Donc c'est forcément dans des réseaux privés, il y a des vrais systèmes organisés, c'est vrai, où des personnes louent des dizaines et des dizaines d'appartements sous leur nom. Dans chacun de ces appartements, il y a plusieurs personnes qui payent toutes un loyer, non pas pour leur chambre, mais pour une place, pour un lit, pour un matelas. Tout le monde le sait, on s'en accommode quelque part.
All the Filipinos we've met have the same landlady, profiting from their situation. We'll call her Ms. K. Introducing herself as a pilot, she's believed to be in her 40s and makes a good income from subletting.
When Miss comes to get the rent, she always comes very late, like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. We are already asleep, actually. And then she knocks on the door. Sometimes because we are already asleep and we have to go to work early in the morning, we don't open it anymore. But still, she goes up and down from the building, knocking and knocking. Sometimes she has the key, so she opens it. She doesn't give receipts when she gets the payment. She only gives like a text message like, thank you for the food. It is a sign that she got the money. In this building, yes, she has 6 other flats, including us, but it is not under her name. She uses other names like her sister, sister-in-law, brother-in-law, you know, countrymen, cousins, I don't know.
Ms. K has been managing around 30 apartments in Geneva and across Switzerland. Since 2011, she's housed hundreds of people. A well-oiled system, it was suddenly exposed in March 2020 after a series of dawn raids by the police.
We woke up with a big bang on the door. Someone is knocking so loud on the door at 6:45 in the morning. And then we opened the door. They woke us up, telling us to wake up and get our passports and other documents that we have, and we should all move in the kitchen.
I know all of you here don't have papers. Please, don't be afraid. We just want to ask something about the owner of this house.
Despite the risks, some tenants made formal complaints against Ms. K. Lawyer Celine Moreau represents some of them.
Le fait de devoir aller dans un local de la police, dans un local du ministère public, sans avoir ces documents, c'est déjà effrayant. Surtout parce que par ailleurs, on ne peut pas leur donner la garantie, nous, leurs défenseurs, du fait qu'elles ne seront pas inquiétées pour ça. Et les plaignants vont être potentiellement marginalisés ou en tout cas pointés du doigt comme étant les personnes qui ont été parlées à la police.
Knowing that I don't have the document, it is the best thing to do because no one can give us protection anymore. It is only that we have to rely on the government, the authority, that maybe just telling the truth and supporting them, they could support us back.
Ms. K was arrested on charges relating to usury. That is, making unlawful financial gain through exploitation.
L'infraction d'usure, c'est une infraction qui a 3 composantes principales. La première, c'est qu'il y a une personne, la victime, qui est en état de vulnérabilité particulière. Il y a l'exploitation de cette vulnérabilité et puis il y a une disproportion entre un service qui est offert et le montant qui est demandé pour ce service. C'est des loyers qui sont à plus de 100%, c'est-à-dire en fait 2 fois plus élevés que ce qu'on pourrait espérer. On est au-delà de toute loi du marché qui n'est pas favorable aux locataires, on est au-delà de toute bonne affaire pour le bailleur. Donc, dans le cas qui nous intéresse, on est clairement dans des situations d'usure.
So she looks like she has money. If you look at her, she has nice outfit and expensive like this. She looks like. Mm-hmm. And yes, of course, when she comes, she has lots of money in her bag because she came from other places already to get rents.
We contact Ms. K to ask her about the allegations, but she directs us to her lawyer, Yael Hayat.
S'enrichir, on va dire, vulgairement sur le dos d'une population clandestine, ce n'est pas encore être usurier. S'enrichir, même obtenir un gain substantiel, ça n'est pas encore de l'usure. Donc, il faut appréhender tous les contours et notamment, parce que le tribunal fédéral le dit, intégrer le risque aussi que prend cette personne. lorsque l'on sous-loue à une population régulière, on prend le risque d'être hors la loi. Donc, il faut apprécier cela, apprécier le fait que l'on peut augmenter le loyer d'un certain pourcentage parce que l'on prend des risques, et puis se demander, en fait, s'il y a de l'usure.
According to the police, Ms. Kay earned more than $21,000 per month from subletting.
Il y a en même temps la femme d'affaires et en même temps, il y a la jeune femme qui elle-même a ses propres origines et a son propre vécu et son histoire et qui sait qu'il y a tout un pan de la population, on va dire, clandestine à Genève qui est délaissée des régimes, très clairement. Lorsqu'elle permet un abri à cette population, elle pourrait avoir les traits d'une mère Teresa et elle pourrait effectivement s'inscrire dans un geste vertueux.
When she comes to our place and get our rent, it is just like business. It's a business conversation. You pay, and she said goodbye, and that's it. She doesn't stay long. She doesn't spend much time talking with us. No. She doesn't even say where she came from or where she's going next or what. She just, okay, I need it fast, okay, faster, I'm late, always late. It's always like a drag for her.
Ms. Kay also has other rooms advertised on Airbnb, making her seem more businesswoman than benefactor. But she does provide a roof for those who can't use the traditional rental market, people without legal status or steady jobs.
Okay. Ali.
Christophe Giraud is CEO at Hospice General, which implements Geneva's social welfare policy.
Elle héberge plusieurs des usagers qui se sont adressés à l'aide sociale. Donc effectivement, on la connaît dans le sens qu'elle n'est pas inconnue de nos services, comme on pourrait dire. Elle nous présente des baux qui sont tout à fait légaux et conformes et avec des montants de loyer qui sont tout à fait dans les barèmes de l'aide sociale. Nos usagers ne se sont pas plaints, donc notre action s'arrête là.
Ms. Kay was clearly aware of the welfare rates. She'd asked for the maximum possible amount, $1,200 per tenant, often for just a simple room. According to the investigation file, she housed at least 4 welfare recipients. One who was unable to manage his spending had his benefits paid directly into Ms. Kay's account. And his doesn't seem to be an isolated case.
Nous connaissons un certain nombre de ces marchands de sommeil, mais une fois encore, ce n'est pas dans notre mandat de lutter contre le phénomène, et pour autant que les baux et les montants des loyers soient dans le cadre de la loi, on ne peut rien faire en tant qu'hospice général. Il est évident que dans un marché aussi tendu, un marché du logement aussi tendu que celui de Genève, des gens qui sont à l'aide sociale ont énormément de difficultés à trouver un appartement. Il y a très peu de propriétaires, très peu de bailleurs qui sont prêts à leur donner un bail en leur nom propre.
This situation plays into the hands of slumlords. And it seems Ms. Kay's business is just the tip of the iceberg. In Geneva, it's estimated more than 10,000 undocumented migrants struggle to find accommodation. It's a market that could also appeal to property management companies. Ms. Kay has rented 20 apartments to Zimmerman, a company with 11,000 tenants on its books, worth more than $160 million. Lawyer Celine Moreau says it's difficult to believe the company was unaware of her activities.
Il y avait des appartements qui étaient vraiment remplis au point qu'on ait 6 personnes dans les mêmes chambres, dans des lits superposés. Donc une utilisation vraiment intense des parties communes de l'immeuble. L'argument selon lequel tout ça est possible sans qu'à aucun moment un gestionnaire d'immeuble comme une régie ne puisse s'en rendre compte est difficilement entendable. Il y avait vraiment une ampleur considérable dans la commission d'infraction.
In 2018, a subtenant with a residence permit alerted the company to Ms. K's activities.
I contacted the Zimmerman. I told them she's charging us much more. I sent to them everything, all the evidence I had. I told them she was renting to people even without papers and the excessive price. I sent them a lot of emails. I called them. I went there to their office. They told me, okay, we are not sure what to do in this situation. Someone has to report it. But nothing happened.
We contacted Zimmerman's management to ask them about Ms. K.
Oui, je vous appelais concernant l'affaire de Madame K. En fait, j'ai essayé de contacter votre régie plusieurs fois et j'ai pas eu de réponse.
The director of the company declined to be interviewed, but told us he was stunned to hear about the actions of Ms. K. Zimmerman's history with the landlady suggests otherwise. After a court investigation began in 2015, management terminated her leases, but by 2016, the company was back in business with her. And according to a search, Zimmerman had leases with at least 2 other slumlords. Even more damning, documents found during last year's police raids show that in 2018, when Ms. K made a request for a lease, the company's administrator judged it too dangerous, but a director asked him to turn a blind eye. Ms. K is still under investigation. If convicted, she faces up to 15 years in prison. For those at the heart of the case, the struggle to find affordable accommodation continues. Forced out of their apartments after police raids, some now live in rooms managed by other slumlords.
Ce type de malversation, de trafic, de criminalité existe parce qu'existe cette population particulièrement vulnérable. Mais si cette population particulièrement vulnérable existe, c'est parce qu'il y a une réelle demande au niveau de l'emploi. Si, au bout d'un moment, il y aurait une possibilité d'être régularisé, c'est des personnes qui pourraient sortir de ce type d'emprise et arrêter d'alimenter à leur corps défendant ce type de criminalité.
While Geneva's slumlords make a profit, undocumented Filipino workers try to survive the best they can, far from the families they're providing for.
I will be home soon, by God's grace. A few more years to work here. If I will be able to have a decent saving, then maybe it's enough for me to go home.
We know what's happening in our region. We know how to get to places that others cannot. I was just thrown tear gas by the police on purpose. Al Jazeera has the time in its programming to go live from the Amazon, to go live to where another story that may not be mainstream is happening. The fires are still ongoing. I'm not sure if you can see. People here said they're being threatened by miners and loggers. The way that you tell the story is what can make a difference.
The health of humanity is at stake. A global pandemic requires a global response. WHO is the guardian of global health, delivering life-saving tools, supplies, and training to help the world's most vulnerable people, uniting across borders to speed up the development of tests, treatments, and a vaccine, keeping you up to date with what's happening on the ground, in the ward, and in the lab. Now, more than ever, the world needs WHO, making a healthier world for you, for everyone.
Pro-Moscow separatists tell Ukrainian forces in Severodonetsk to surrender or die after Russia destroys the last bridge out of the city. Hello, I'm Darren Jordan. This is Al Jazeera, live from Doha. Also coming up,
he's become detached from reality.
Donald Trump's Attorney General describes how the former president clung to dangerous theories of election fraud before the attack on Congress. After a failed legal challenge, Britain will start deporting asylum seekers to Rwanda under a deal that's provoked criticism from the UN.
This is all wrong. This is all wrong. This deal.
And Australia beat Peru in a dramatic penalty shootout to confirm a place at the Football World Cup in Qatar. Russia has destroyed the last bridge out of Severodonetsk, a city at the heart of the battle for Ukraine's Donbas region. Civilians are effectively trapped in the eastern city with no means of escape. Russia has warned Ukrainian troops to surrender or die. Russia and its allied forces have been attacking a chemical plant with artillery, where many civilians are sheltering.
Severodonetsk has practically been blocked after they blew up the last bridge which connected it to Lysychansk. Those Ukrainian divisions that are there forever. They have two options, either to follow the example of their fellow servicemen and surrender, or to die. There is no other option.
Charles Stratford is covering developments from Kyiv.
Potentially a very dire situation in that city, Severodonetsk, one of two cities that the Russians are not in full control of in the region of Lugansk in Donbass. We've actually spoken to a deputy commander who is serving, a Ukrainian deputy commander serving in Severodonetsk. He's saying that indeed that third and last bridge had been hit this morning. We understand by Russian forces, but we cannot confirm as to whether that bridge has been completely and utterly destroyed. Now, if indeed it has huge implications, obviously, for the Ukrainian forces, military fighters inside that city in terms of getting military supplies across that river to them, and potentially for an escape route if they retreat. It also has huge implications for what we understand, or what we're being told, are up to around 10,000 civilians inside the city. Now, according to the head of Lugansk Regional Administration, Military Regional Administration, he's saying that there are around about 500 civilians sheltering underneath that chemical plant, the Azot chemical plant that we know has come under heavy shelling, according to the Ukrainians in recent days. He's saying that there could be up to 40 children also in and amongst those civilians.
Well, Ukraine's president is again asking Western allies to send more advanced weapons to counter the Russian offensive.
The battles in Donbass will surely go down in military history as one of the most brutal in Europe. The Ukrainian army and our intelligence tactically still beat the Russian military. And we draw the attention of our partners on a daily basis to the fact that only sufficient number of modern artillery for Ukraine will ensure our advantage and finally end Russian torture of Donbass.
Meanwhile, Amnesty International has accused Russia of war crimes for its relentless shelling of Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv. The rights group says it's found evidence that Moscow used cluster munitions and landmines. They cited one attack on a playground that killed 9 people and wounded 35. Throughout the war, Russia has denied committing atrocities. Kharkiv has been under near constant bombardment since the invasion began.
Many of these strikes were launched using cluster munitions, which are widely banned, as well as other indiscriminate weapons such as artillery shells and rockets and scatterable landmines, which are indiscriminate when used in urban areas. And such indiscriminate attacks, when they result in civilian death and injuries, as well as the destruction of civilian objects, are war crimes.
The former U.S. Attorney General William Barr has described watching Donald Trump become detached from reality while refusing to accept his 2020 election defeat. He and the former president's family members are among the latest testimonies heard by the committee investigating last year's Capitol Hill riot. Adi Jocasta reports from Washington, D.C.
The January 6th committee opened public hearing number 2 with a focus on election night 2020 inside the White House, where Donald Trump and his advisors watched the election returns with increasing worry.
The Fox News Decision Desk is calling Arizona for Joe Biden. That is a big get for the Biden campaign.
Did that shift the atmosphere or the attitude in the White House?
Completely. It was becoming clear that the race would not be called on election night.
Witnesses say Trump was livid and ignored their advice to wait before making a public statement. They said he instead turned to his private attorney, Rudy Giuliani, who was described as drunk.
The mayor was definitely intoxicated. Mayor Giuliani was saying, "We want it. You're stealing it from us. Where'd all the votes come from? We need to go say that we won." And essentially that anyone who didn't agree with that position was being weak.
A defiant Trump then declared his false victory.
We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election.
This was the Fox News political editor, later fired from his job after calling Arizona for Biden.
After the election, as of November 7th, in your judgment, what were the chances of President Trump winning the election?
After that point?
Yes.
In the weeks that followed, Trump would continue to spread the lies of widespread voter fraud, despite being told by Attorney General William Barr that the claim was bogus.
I was somewhat demoralized because I thought, boy, if he really believes this stuff, he has, lost contact with he's become detached from reality.
Over and over, witnesses testified that Trump refused to accept his election defeat, despite the growing evidence otherwise.
Not only was there not evidence of 8,000 dead voters voting in Pennsylvania, there wasn't evidence of 8.
The former president's media campaign spread the election falsehoods, invigorating his base. Supporters donated $250 million to Trump's so-called Election Defense Fund. Investigators testified the fund didn't exist and that some of the money went to Trump's hotel collection and the event company that organized the January 6th rally.
Not only was there the big lie, there was the big ripoff.
The committee plans another half-dozen public hearings to connect the election lies with the violence of January 6th. They say evidence will show that Trump tried to corrupt the Justice Department, and when that failed, assembled the mob that would try to keep him in power by force. Heidi Jo Castro, Al Jazeera, Washington.
A British judge has thrown out last-ditch attempts to halt the deportation of refugees and migrants to Rwanda. More legal challenges are planned. The first flight is scheduled to take off on Tuesday. Laura Burden-Manley reports.
Shame on you! Shame on you!
A chorus of anger from protesters outside London's Court of Appeal as a judge gave the green light for the first flight of refugees and migrants to Rwanda. Rights groups say it includes people who had escaped war in Afghanistan and Syria, and being flown more than 6,000 kilometers away will traumatize them further.
They've suffered incredibly. They've seen family members killed. They've had torture themselves. They are tired. They're at the end of their tether. They're finding detention incredibly traumatizing, and the thought of a further deportation halfway across the road is absolutely terrifying for them.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the deportation strategy will undermine people smuggling networks and deter refugees from making dangerous journeys to Britain. The United Nations Refugee Agency hit back, saying Rwanda's human rights record is under scrutiny and the UK is shirking responsibility.
This is all wrong. This is all wrong. This deal. It is the foundation of the right to asylum that people that are on a country's territory, especially a country that is a signatory to the convention and has the institutions to deal with that.
In April, Home Secretary Priti Patel visited Kigali to finalise the project and potentially send tens of thousands of people there. The deal includes a payment of about $150 million to the Rwandan government. So far this year, 10,000 migrants and refugees made the crossing from mainland Europe to the UK, and 28,000 last year. In November, 27 people drowned when their dinghy deflated, and many more have had to be rescued from the Channel's busy shipping lanes. Some of those who risked their lives will leave on the first flight on Tuesday, but there may not be many on it. A series of individual legal challenges mean only a few of the 130 people notified will leave. And the government continues to face pressure from activists, rights groups and unions who insist the move is unlawful. Laura Badamanli, Al Jazeera.
And the entire leadership of the Church of England says Britain's plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda is immoral. In a letter to the Times newspaper, the Archbishops of Canterbury and York, along with 23 other bishops, stated those to be deported to Rwanda have had no chance to appeal. They've had no consideration of their asylum claim, recognition of medical needs, or any attempt to understand their predicament. Al Jazeera Media Network continues to demand a rapid, independent and transparent investigation into the killing of its journalist in the occupied West Bank. Shireen Abu Akleh was shot in the head by Israeli forces while she was on assignment in Jenin. On the day of her funeral, Israeli forces stormed the procession and started beating mourners, causing pallbearers to almost drop their casket. That didn't stop thousands of Palestinians from marching through occupied East Jerusalem to take part in her funeral and burial. Members of the international community have condemned her killing and continue to call for an investigation. Akleh was with Al Jazeera for 25 years, covering the story of the Israeli occupation. She was known as the voice of Palestine. Lots more still to come here in Al Jazeera, including the DR Congo military accuses Rwanda of invasion after a rebel group seizes a key border town. And how a record-breaking heatwave in India and Pakistan is affecting the region's most anticipated summer fruit. More on that, statements.
Welcome to another look at the international forecast. The heat really remains a major concern across a good part of North America, particularly across the US over the next couple of days. Little weather fronts wriggling away somewhat further north, pushing up towards the plains, towards the prairies. We have got some wetter weather in play here, but it's about that heat, that extreme heat, record-breaking heat, well into the 30s. Some places touching the 40s, somewhat more wintry. Notice over towards the northwest, some cooler air is in place. If only it would be rather more spread out. Cold enough for some snow over the Canadian Rockies, maybe around the mountain states of the US. Certainly some very heavy rain through the prairies, easing further eastward. Some lively showers down towards the southeast, hot, humid and pretty wet, thundery downpours for the southeastern corner of the US on Tuesday afternoon. But the heat, that's very much in place across those central parts. That wetter weather, you can see that hook of wetter weather just making its way around that western side of the lakes, just pushing up through Lake Superior, easing into central parts of Canada as we go on through Wednesday. It's largely dry and hot, plenty of sunshine further west. Plenty of sunshine coming down across a good part of Mexico. Then the usual scattering of showers for the Caribbean.
Wherever you go in the world, one airline goes forward to make it feel exceptional. Qatar Airways, going places together.
Welcome back. A quick reminder of our top stories here this hour. Ukraine says Russia has destroyed the last bridge out of the eastern city of Severodonetsk. Moscow-backed separatists claim Ukrainian troops are now effectively trapped in the city, warning them to surrender or die. Top advisors to Donald Trump say they told him his claims of widespread election fraud were not legitimate, but the former president seemed detached from reality. These statements were part of video testimony shown at a committee hearing into the attack on Capitol Hill last year. And the UK's Court of Appeal has rejected a request to halt the first flight deporting refugees and migrants to Rwanda. Human rights groups had asked the court to block the flight scheduled to leave on Tuesday. Now, the UK government has introduced new legislation to change post-Brexit trading rules for Northern Ireland. The EU has warned it'll take legal action if the UK tries to alter parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol on its own. Northern Ireland's pro-British Democratic Unionist Party is strongly opposed to the existing agreement. It's feared there could be a trade war if no solution is found. Charlie Andrews is in London. She explains why the government wants to scrap parts of the Brexit deal.
The government unveiled their Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, which will have its second reading in Parliament on Tuesday. And essentially, what it plans to do is create a new system of border checks. Two routes through which goods can go from the UK to Ireland. If they're going to Northern Ireland, they'll go through a green channel undergoing no checks, but to the Republic of Ireland, a red channel and more stringent checks. They also want businesses to be able to choose whether they adhere to EU or UK goods standards and limit the powers of the European Court of Justice when it comes to trade arbitration disputes. Now, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says they're not giving up the protocol, but they are changing elements of it. But that's not how the EU sees it. They see this protocol as being enshrined in international law, and they say that this bill is going to break trust between the two sides, and they could see retaliatory measures in the form of trade restrictions. There's also been anger from opposition MPs here and some Conservative MPs who say that by breaking international law, this bill could undermine everything that Britain stands for. In Northern Ireland, too, majority of MPs and the government there signed a letter calling this legislation reckless and saying it should not be done in their name because they say majority of businesses and people in Northern Ireland are essentially happy with the protocol. They recognise there are flaws, but believe that most of them can be ironed out. So at the moment, it's looking like Boris Johnson is in quite a lonely place. But this could be his plan. Dramatic unilateral action, which he might hope will bring the EU back to the negotiating table. It's brinkmanship, but we have seen it before in his Brexit negotiating strategy. But it's certainly a gamble.
The M23 rebel group has seized a key border town in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Bunagana in North Kivu province is one of the main crossings into neighboring Uganda. The North Kivu military spokesperson has denounced the attack and called it a violation. The rebels were last active in the area in 2012 and more than 25,000 people fled since they launched a renewed offensive last month.
After witnessing huge setbacks suffered by their soldiers on the ground, the Rwandan Defense Forces have this time, and in the open, decided to violate the intangibility of our border and the integrity of our territory by occupying the border town of Bunanga this Monday. This is nothing less than an invasion of the DRC, and the armed forces of the Democratic Republic of Congo will take all of the necessary measures to defend their territory.
Brazil's president says human remains were found during the search for two men who disappeared in the Amazon last week. Jair Bolsonaro says DNA tests are being conducted. Earlier, police denied reports the bodies of indigenous expert Bruno Pereira and British journalist Dom Phillips were found, adding to the confusion. Monica Yanakiev reports now from Rio de Janeiro.
Hundreds of indigenous protesters took to the streets of Atalaia do Norte. They demanded justice for indigenous expert Bruno Pereira and British journalist Dom Phillips. They went missing a week ago while they were returning from an expedition to the Javari Valley Reservation, home to the largest number of uncontacted tribes in the world. Where are Bruno and Dom, they chanted. But the demonstrators also denounced the onslaught they have been suffering from illegal fishermen, poachers, loggers, and miners. Bruno Pereira had been helping them patrol their territory and map the invasions. Dom Phillips was accompanying him on a trip to finish writing a book on how to save the Amazon. On Sunday, after a week-long search, divers retrieved a plastic bag from the river containing a backpack and some belongings of the two missing men.
Relatives say the backpack contained a computer, all belongings, socks, shirts, shorts, their work tools such as their laptops.
Reports on Monday morning that two bodies had also been found were denied by Brazil's federal police. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro said he thought something evil had happened to him.
The evidence leads us to believe that something bad was done to them because human viscera were floating in the river.
Indigenous leaders we spoke to said they will keep up the pressure to find out what happened to Dom Phillips and Bruno Pereira, and that they will continue the patrols that Pereira organized to help protect the rainforest. Monica Yanaki of Al Jazeera, Rio de Janeiro.
Ecuador's president is vowing to use force to break up a national strike. The largest indigenous farmers' union is blocking highways in protest against Guillermo Lasso's economic policies. Protesters want the government to reduce the cost of fuel, as Lucia Newman now reports.
This is the beginning of a national strike that could paralyze Ecuador.
The mobilization is national, it's regional, and the mobilization is indefinite. If the president gives us answers today, then we will stop. If the president does not give answers to any of our demands, then we will continue indefinitely.
Demonstrations led by Ecuador's powerful indigenous confederation almost 3 years ago nearly overthrew then-President Lenín Moreno, forcing him to backtrack on plans to raise fuel prices. Today, their demands are far greater. Not only do these protesters want fuel prices lowered and frozen, but they also want the same for essential goods and services.
We are literally starving to death. There is no work. Farm products are minimized. There is no proper support from the government. With the rise in fuel prices, everything is more expensive.
The government doesn't hear us. Does it hear the poor farmers? No, it doesn't. Does it know the price of fertilizers? No, and our products are already cheap. How are we going to survive to feed our children?
Roads are being blocked in at least 10 of Ecuador's 24 provinces. Conservative President Guillermo Lasso says he will not tolerate further disruptions.
Just now, as we were beginning to get back on our feet from the pandemic, we cannot allow political groups who want to destabilize Ecuador and profit from the chaos paralyze our country.
The government is already struggling to control rampant violence and drug trafficking amid a severe economic crisis. But unless there's a breakthrough, the strike by the well-organized Indigenous Confederation, with the support of other trade unions, could present the most serious challenge to Ecuador's stability. Lucia Newman, Al Jazeera.
Cuba says it sanctioned 381 people who took part in last year's anti-government protests. Nearly 300 of those were sentenced to between 5 and 25 years in prison. Thousands of people turned out across the country last year, angry over food, medicine and power shortages and a wave of COVID-19 infections. The US and the European Union have criticized the trials, saying they lack transparency. More than 100 million people have been warned to stay indoors if possible as high temperatures hit the US East Coast. Several cities are under excessive heat warnings, with temperatures forecast to reach about 40 degrees Celsius. Officials say the heat wave will last until Wednesday. Many cities have announced plans to open cooling centers, and the mayor of Chicago has suggested that people can go to public libraries to cool off. Thousands of firefighters from California to New Mexico are struggling against hot and dry weather to contain massive wildfires. Large blazes are burning in New Mexico and areas around Los Angeles. And an unprecedented heat wave in India has sucked the life out of an important crop, mangoes. Bhavani Mittal looks at the impact for farmers, traders and buyers.
It's one of the most anticipated activities of the year, harvesting mangoes. The Dasheri variety is native to Uttar Pradesh in northern India. Junaid Faridi's family has owned this orchard for centuries. He says a scorching hot summer has destroyed at least 30% of his crop.
We witnessed unprecedented heat this time.